There is a single question, that Warren Buffett believes defines the entire trajectory of a human life. It's a question he has posed to students, to executives, to anyone who will listen, for over half a century. And your answer to it, he would argue, is a more accurate predictor of your ultimate success and happiness than your IQ, your education, or your starting capital. The question is this: would you rather be the world's greatest lover, but have everyone around you think you are the world's worst lover? Or would you rather be the world's worst lover, but have everyone believe you are the world's greatest? Ponder that for a moment. It's not a trick. It's a diagnostic tool of the soul. Your gut reaction reveals the fundamental operating system you use to navigate the world. It exposes whether you live your life by what Buffett calls the outer scorecard, or the inner scorecard. The outer scorecard is the world of applause, of public perception, of likes and retweets and quarterly earnings reports. It is the validation that comes from outside. It's the brand of car you drive, the title on your business card, the school your kids attend. It is the desperate, unending pursuit of approval from people you may not even respect. The inner scorecard, by contrast, is the quiet, unshakable judgment you have of yourself. It's a measure against your own potential, your own principles, your own core values. It is the person you are when absolutely no one is watching. And in the grand, sweeping narrative of business, finance, and life, Buffett argues that the person who chooses the inner scorecard, the one who would rather prove the world's greatest lover even if they are slandered for it, is the one who will win the only game that matters. This isn't just a piece of folksy life advice from an old billionaire in Omaha. It is the central processing unit of his entire philosophy. It is the master algorithm that has guided every major decision, every billion-dollar acquisition, every partnership he has ever made. It is the reason Berkshire Hathaway exists in its current form, a fortress of capital and trust in a world of fleeting trends and broken promises. This is the key to authentic leadership, to building trust that lasts for generations, and to making decisions that stand the test of time. Today, we are not just going to talk about this concept. We are going to deconstruct it, piece by piece, and build a powerful mental model you can install directly into your own life. We will explore the genesis of this powerful idea, rooted in the uncompromising integrity of a man who came before Buffett. We will dissect how this single principle builds the most valuable and unbreakable asset in any business: reputation. We will see how it connects to the humility of knowing what you don't know, a secret weapon in a world of overconfident experts. We will learn how it gives you the almost superhuman power to say no to the temptations that derail 99% of people. And finally, we will understand the most profound concept of all, the compounding of character, and how a life lived by the inner scorecard generates a return on investment that cannot be measured in mere dollars, but in a legacy of unshakable value. This is the blueprint for a life of substance in an age of surfaces. This is the final promise of integrity. Our journey into the heart of the inner scorecard begins not in a boardroom, but in the crucible of American politics, with a man of unyielding principle who shaped Warren Buffett more than any other, his father, Howard Homan Buffett. To understand the son, you must first understand the father, because the inner scorecard was not an idea Warren discovered in a book. It was an ideal he saw lived out every single day. Howard Buffett was a stockbroker in Omaha, who in the aftermath of the Great Depression built a business on a foundation of absolute, almost radical, integrity. But his defining chapter came when he was elected to the United States Congress in 1942. He was a Republican, a man of staunch conservative and libertarian beliefs, sent to Washington at a time of immense national unity and patriotic fervor surrounding World War II. The pressure to conform, to toe the party line, to vote for popular measures in the name of the war effort was immense. This was the ultimate test of the outer scorecard. The applause for a congressman who supported popular wartime spending bills was deafening. The criticism for anyone who dared to question the expansion of government power, even for a noble cause, was swift and brutal. Howard Buffett did not care. He had an inner scorecard, a set of principles carved in stone, and he measured his actions against those principles, not against the shifting winds of public opinion or the desires of his party's leadership. A foundational anecdote that captures this perfectly occurred in 1943. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, a Democrat, was pushing for a massive expansion of the Lend-Lease program, which supplied Allied nations with war materials. The program was overwhelmingly popular. To vote against it was to be painted as unpatriotic, as an isolationist, as someone who was hindering the fight against tyranny. The Outer Scorecard screamed, "Vote yes, get the applause, secure your re-election." Howard Buffett, however, studied the bill. He believed, based on his core principles of fiscal conservatism and limited government, that the bill gave the president far too much unchecked power and set a dangerous precedent for future spending. He saw it as a blank check that betrayed the trust of the American taxpayer. So in the face of immense pressure from his colleagues, from the media, and from his constituents back home, Congressman Howard Buffett voted no. The backlash was immediate. He was condemned in newspapers, his patriotism was questioned, he knew it would hurt him politically, but he had satisfied his own standards. He had measured himself against his inner scorecard, and he had not been found wanting. Warren, a young boy at the time, watched all of this. He saw his father come home, not defeated, but serene. He saw a man who slept soundly at night because his conscience was clear, even if his political future was not. This wasn't an isolated incident. Howard Buffett consistently voted his conscience, often finding himself in a tiny minority, sometimes even being the lone dissenting vote. He fought against conscription, believing it was a form of slavery. He fought against the Truman Doctrine, arguing it would lead to endless foreign entanglements. He was, in many ways, a man out of time, a Cassandra warning of debts and wars that would come to pass decades later. For his troubles, his political career was rocky. He served a few terms, was defeated, and then came back again. He never rose to a position of great power within the party structure because he refused to play the game of trading favors and compromising his core values. The party leadership couldn't count on him to be a reliable vote. They could only count on him to be Howard Buffett. And for him, that was the only form of reliability that mattered. He was living proof that the praise of the crowd is fleeting and often wrong, but the quiet approval of your own character is permanent. This real-life, high-stakes drama taught Warren a lesson more profound than any business school could offer, that the only real capital you have is your integrity, and the only real judge of that integrity is you. The world can be wrong, the markets can be wrong, the polls can be wrong, but your own well-calibrated sense of right and wrong is the only compass you can truly trust. The underlying psychological principle at play here is one of the most powerful forces in human society, social proof, often called herd mentality. Our brains are wired for survival, and for millennia, survival meant belonging to the tribe. To be cast out was a death sentence. As a result, we have a deep-seated instinctual urge to conform, to do what others are doing, to believe what others are believing. When everyone around us is buying a certain stock, our brain screams at us to buy it too. When a political opinion becomes popular, challenging it feels physically dangerous. This is the engine of the outer scorecard. It's the neurological basis for our obsession with public opinion, with fitting in, with seeking approval. Social proof is a cognitive shortcut. Instead of doing the hard work of analyzing a situation from first principles, we simply look at what the crowd is doing and assume they know something we don't. In many situations, this is efficient. If you see a crowd of people running from a building, it's probably wise to run with them rather than stopping to investigate the cause. But in the world of investing, business, and life-altering decision-making, this shortcut is a direct path to mediocrity and disaster. The inner scorecard is a deliberate, conscious act of rebellion against this ingrained psychological tendency. It is the decision to disconnect from the tribe's judgment and rely on your own. It's a form of cognitive insulation. When Howard Buffett stood up to vote no on a popular bill, he was consciously overriding the powerful ancient signal from his brain that said, "Don't do this. You will be ostracized. You will be seen as an enemy." He was able to do this because he had replaced the tribe's validation with his own. His internal framework of what was right and wrong was stronger than the external pressure to conform. This is why developing an inner scorecard is so difficult. It requires constant vigilance against our own programming. It requires the courage to feel the discomfort of being in the minority and not flinching. It means accepting that you will be misunderstood, criticized, and sometimes even ridiculed for your principles. But the payoff, as Buffett learned, is immense. You are freed from the madness of crowds. You can see bubbles for what they are, because you aren't caught up in the euphoria. You can make ethical decisions under pressure, because your moral compass isn't swayed by what is convenient or popular. You are playing a different game on a different field with a different set of rules. While everyone else is reacting to the noise of the crowd, you are acting on the signal of your own judgment. So how do we translate this powerful theory into a practical tool? The applied mental model for building your own inner scorecard is an exercise I call the eulogy versus the resume. It's a profound, often uncomfortable, but ultimately clarifying process. Here's the blueprint. Take out 2 blank sheets of paper. On the first sheet, at the top, write, "My resume." Now spend 15 minutes listing all the things you would want on your professional resume. List the titles you want to hold: CEO, Executive Vice President, Founder. List the financial milestones you want to achieve: a net worth of $10 million, a portfolio that generates a certain amount of passive income, a successful exit from a company you started. List the accolades you want to receive: Forbes 30, Under 30, Entrepreneur of the Year, recognition from your peers. Be honest and ambitious. This is your outer scorecard. It's a list of achievements the world can see and applaud. Now put that piece of paper aside. Take the second sheet, and at the top write, "My eulogy." Now imagine you have lived a long, full life. You are at your own funeral, an invisible spectator. Someone you love and deeply respect, a child, a spouse, a best friend, is standing up to speak about you. What do you want them to say? What qualities do you hope they remember you for? Write these down. They will not be talking about your job title or the size of your bank account. They will be talking about your character. Perhaps they will say, "He was a person of unshakable integrity. His word was his bond." Or, "She was the most generous person I ever knew. She always had time to help others, even when she was busy." Or, "He was an incredible father who never missed a school play or a baseball game." Or, "She was brave. She always stood up for what was right, even when it was hard." These are the qualities that make up your inner scorecard. These are your core values. Now put the 2 pieces of paper side by side. Look at your resume and look at your eulogy. The crucial question is this: are the activities required to achieve the goals on your resume in conflict with the qualities listed in your eulogy? Is the relentless pursuit of that next promotion causing you to sacrifice time with your family, a core value you listed? Is the pressure to hit a quarterly number tempting you to cut corners, compromising the integrity you want to be remembered for? Is your desire for public acclaim making you say things you don't believe, undermining the authentic leadership you cherish? The gap between these 2 documents is the source of most of the misery and regret in the modern professional world. The path of the 99% is to focus obsessively on the resume, hoping that it will somehow, magically, lead to a great eulogy. The path of Warren Buffett, of Howard Buffett, is to focus obsessively on living out the eulogy every single day, with the profound understanding that a life lived with such integrity will inevitably produce a resume worth having. This isn't a one-time exercise. This is a living document. Review it every quarter. Use it as a filter for every major decision. When faced with a new opportunity, ask yourself, will this move me closer to the person described in my eulogy? This blueprint forces you to define your own victory conditions for life, independent of what society tells you to want. It is the first, most crucial step in building a life of substance and creating your own unshakable inner scorecard. Let's explore the antithesis, the well-trodden path of the 99% who live and die by the outer scorecard. The modern poster child for this approach is the social media CEO, a figure whose entire existence is curated for public consumption. Their reality is filtered through Instagram stories, triumphant LinkedIn posts, and carefully crafted tweets. Their business strategy is often indistinguishable from their personal branding strategy. Success is not measured by profit margins or customer satisfaction, but by follower counts, media mentions, and the all-important metric of buzz. The case of WeWork and its co-founder Adam Neumann is a masterclass in the catastrophic consequences of an outer scorecard philosophy. The company wasn't built on sound business fundamentals. It was built on a story, a vibe, a messianic narrative of elevating the world's consciousness. Neumann wasn't just a CEO, he was a guru, a visionary. The metrics that mattered were not cash flow or occupancy rates, but the grandeur of the vision and the charisma of the leader. Investors, caught up in the herd mentality and mesmerized by the powerful social proof of other prominent backers, poured billions into the company. The outer scorecard was glowing. WeWork was on the cover of magazines. Neumann was hailed as the next Steve Jobs. The valuation soared to an astonishing $47 billion, completely untethered from financial reality. But behind the curtain, the Inner Scorecard was bankrupt. The company was hemorrhaging cash. The corporate governance was a disaster. Neumann's personal enrichment and erratic behavior were red flags ignored in the frenzy of public adoration. The entire edifice was built on sand, on the applause of the crowd. And when the time came for the company to face the scrutiny of a public offering, the curtain was pulled back, and the illusion shattered. The outer scorecard, once so brilliant, was extinguished overnight. The valuation plummeted by over 90%. The IPO was canceled. Neumann was ousted. Thousands of employees lost their jobs. The story serves as a stark warning. A business, or a life, built solely on external validation is incredibly fragile. It is a house of cards that can be toppled by a single gust of wind, a bad news cycle, a shift in public sentiment, a market downturn. The social media CEO is constantly dancing for the approval of others, and as a result, they can never build anything of lasting value. They chase trends instead of building moats. They prioritize perception over substance. They are so busy managing their reputation in the short term that they fail to build a character that can withstand long-term scrutiny. This is the path of the 99%. It is seductive because it offers quick, visible rewards. A viral post provides a dopamine hit that solid, quiet work does not. But it is ultimately a hollow pursuit, a treadmill of seeking validation from an ever-fickle crowd. It ends not in the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived, but in the desperate panic of the applause suddenly stopping. How does this abstract concept of an inner scorecard translate into tangible financial advantage? The connection is direct and powerful. A business led by someone with a strong inner scorecard develops a culture of integrity, and this culture manifests on the balance sheet in numerous quantifiable ways. Consider customer loyalty, a company that consistently does the right thing, that honors its promises, that puts its customers' interests first even when it's not profitable in the short term, builds a level of trust that a marketing budget can never buy. This trust translates into a higher customer lifetime value. Customers stay longer, they buy more, and they are less price sensitive. When a competitor offers a 10% discount, a customer loyal to a brand they trust will not switch. That loyalty is a measurable financial asset. Think of a company like Patagonia. Their founder, Yvon Chouinard, has always operated from a deeply ingrained inner scorecard focused on environmentalism and quality. Their famous "Don't Buy This Jacket" ad campaign was a move that would seem insane from an outer scorecard perspective. It actively discouraged consumption, but from an inner scorecard perspective, it was a profound statement of their core values. The result? It created a fanatically loyal customer base who saw the brand not just as a seller of outdoor gear, but as a partner in their own values. This allows Patagonia to command premium pricing and fosters a resilience that other retail brands envy. Next, consider employee turnover. The best talent, the A players in any industry, crave more than just a high salary. They want to work for an organization they believe in. led by people they respect. An authentic leadership team that operates with integrity creates a high-trust environment. In such an environment, employees are more engaged, more productive, and far less likely to leave. The financial impact of this is enormous. The cost of replacing a skilled employee can be anywhere from 50% to 200% of their annual salary when you factor in recruitment costs, training for the new hire, and the lost productivity during the transition. A company with a strong integrity-based culture, a direct output of an inner scorecard, will have a significantly lower turnover rate than its competitors. This is a direct, recurring, and massive saving that flows straight to the bottom line. Finally, think about the cost of capital. A business that is known for its transparent accounting, its fair dealings, and its long-term perspective will be viewed as less risky by lenders and investors. This translates into better terms on loans and a higher valuation in the market. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway is the ultimate example. Its stock has historically traded at a premium precisely because of the market's absolute faith in Buffett's integrity. When you invest in Berkshire, you are not just buying a collection of assets, you are buying into a culture of trust. The inner scorecard, therefore, is not a soft, feel-good concept. It is a hard-nosed financial strategy. It builds moats of loyalty, reduces operational costs, and lowers the cost of capital. It is the bedrock upon which sustainable, long-term financial success is built. The second pillar of Warren Buffett's philosophy is an extension of the inner scorecard, but it is so crucial that it deserves its own deep examination. It is the idea of reputation as an unbreakable asset. Buffett has a famous saying that encapsulates this perfectly. It takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. If you think about that, you'll do things differently. This isn't just a clever aphorism, it is a fundamental operating principle at Berkshire Hathaway. He understands that while the money, the factories, and the stocks are all assets on the balance sheet, the single most valuable asset the company possesses is its reputation for integrity and trustworthiness. And unlike a factory, if you lose it, you can almost never rebuild it. The most dramatic and revealing story of this principle in action is the Salomon Brothers scandal of 1991. It was a crisis that threatened to destroy one of the most powerful firms on Wall Street and posed a significant threat to the stability of the entire U.S. financial system. At the time, Berkshire Hathaway was a major shareholder in Salomon, holding $700 million in preferred stock. The crisis erupted when it was revealed that a rogue trader at Salomon, Paul Moser, had been submitting false bids in U.S. Treasury auctions to corner the market, a clear and flagrant violation of federal law. Worse, it soon came to light that the top leadership of the firm, including its CEO John Gutfreund, had known about the wrongdoing for months and had failed to report it to the authorities. The scandal exploded. The U.S. Treasury banned Salomon from bidding in its auctions, which was a death sentence for a firm whose primary business was trading government bonds. The firm's clients, institutional investors who relied on trust above all else, began pulling their money out in a panic. The stock price was collapsing. The firm was facing imminent bankruptcy and criminal charges. The outer scorecard for Salomon Brothers was in absolute tatters. They were villains, cheaters, the embodiment of Wall Street greed. This is where Warren Buffett stepped in. He had no operational role at Salomon. He was just an investor. He could have sold his stock, taken a loss, and walked away, protecting his own pristine reputation from the toxic fallout. That would have been the easy, logical choice for 99% of investors. But Buffett understood that the crisis was not just about money, it was a systemic risk. The collapse of a firm like Salomon could trigger a domino effect, a financial contagion. And on a deeper level, he saw an opportunity to put his core principles to the ultimate test. He flew to New York and, in a series of dramatic meetings, convinced the Salomon board to fire the existing leadership. Then, in an unprecedented move, he agreed to step in as interim chairman to save the firm. He was 61 years old and had no desire to run a Wall Street investment bank, but he knew he was the only person with the credibility to solve the problem. His personal reputation was the only asset that could stop the bleeding. His first act as chairman was not to talk to lawyers or accountants. It was to instill a new ethos. He gathered the terrified employees of Salomon and laid out his new rules, which were astonishingly simple. He told them, "Lose money for the firm, and I will be understanding. Lose a shred of reputation for the firm, and I will be ruthless." This was the inner scorecard, made manifest as corporate policy. He was changing the measurement of success. It was no longer about maximizing short-term trading profits at any cost. It was about preserving the long-term integrity of the firm, full stop. He then went to Washington and used his most valuable asset, his personal credibility, built over a lifetime of fair dealing, to negotiate with the U.S. Treasury. He met with Nicholas Brady, the Treasury Secretary, and essentially put his own name on the line as collateral. He made a promise that Salomon would be cleaned up, that every infraction would be rooted out, and that the firm would become a model of compliance. He was brutally honest, admitting the full scope of the wrongdoing and not making any excuses. He famously told a congressional committee, "There is nothing that you can discover that we won't have found and told you about first." Because of Buffett's reputation, the Treasury relented. They lifted the ban, allowing Salomon to survive. He then spent the next 9 months in a grueling, hands-on role, overseeing a massive internal investigation, installing new compliance systems, and firing anyone who did not meet his exacting ethical standards. He saved Salomon Brothers, he prevented a wider financial crisis, and in the process, he gave the world the ultimate case study in reputation management. He proved that reputation is not a soft asset, it is hard currency. It is the capital that allows you to operate when all other forms of capital have fled. His actions demonstrated that in a crisis, what people are buying is not your balance sheet but your character. The psychological principles that make reputation such a powerful force are reciprocity and the liking bias. These are two more cognitive shortcuts our brains use to make decisions. The principle of reciprocity is the deeply ingrained social rule that we should try to repay, in kind, what another person has provided us. If someone does us a favor, we feel a psychological obligation to do them a favor in return. A person or a company that builds a strong reputation for integrity and fair dealing is, in essence, constantly doing small favors for the entire ecosystem in which they operate. They are consistently delivering on promises, treating partners well, and acting in a trustworthy manner. Over time, this builds up a huge reservoir of goodwill. When that company inevitably faces a crisis, as Salomon did, the principle of reciprocity kicks in. Regulators like Nicholas Brady are more inclined to be understanding. Customers are more willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. Employees are more likely to rally together. They are repaying the company for its past good behavior. Warren Buffett didn't just walk into the Treasury Secretary's office with a good argument. He walked in with decades of reputational capital that created a powerful sense of obligation. The liking bias is our tendency to agree with people we know and like. We are more likely to do business with them, to trust their judgment, and to forgive their mistakes. This seems obvious, but its power is profound. A reputation for integrity, for being honest and fair, makes people like you, not in a superficial popular kid in high school way, but in a deep, respect-based way. When Buffett took over Salomon, he was leveraging a liking bias that had been built across the entire financial community over 30 years. People trusted him, they respected him, and critically, they liked him because he represented a set of values they admired. This made his requests and his promises far more persuasive than if they had come from a brilliant but disliked financial engineer. Building a reputation is not about public relations or marketing. It's about a consistent pattern of behavior that activates these powerful psychological triggers. It's about making so many deposits of trust into the goodwill bank that when you inevitably need to make a withdrawal, the funds are there. The 99% focus on transactional relationships. The masters of the inner scorecard, like Buffett, focus on building relational equity, knowing that it is the only currency that holds its value in a true crisis. How can you systematically apply this principle of reputation management in your own career or business? The applied mental model for this is what I call the 20-year test, combined with a commitment to what journalists call leading with the bad news. It's a framework for decision-making that forces long-term thinking. Here's the blueprint. Before you make any significant decision, whether it's launching a new product, responding to a customer complaint, negotiating a deal, or even just sending a sensitive email, pause and ask yourself this simple question. In 20 years, when I look back on this decision, will I be proud of the way I handled it? This question brilliantly shifts your perspective. It lifts you out of the short-term pressures of the moment, the need to close the deal, win the argument, or avoid embarrassment, and places you in the position of your future self, the person who has to live with the consequences. It forces you to evaluate the decision not on its immediate payoff, but on its alignment with your long-term character, the person described in your eulogy. A decision that might seem clever or expedient now might look shabby or unethical with the benefit of hindsight. The 20-year test filters out these short-term temptations. It is the ultimate tool for prioritizing your reputation over a quick profit. The second part of the model is to, quote, lead with the bad news. This is what Buffett did when he went before Congress. He didn't try to spin, deflect, or minimize the scandal at Solomon. He opened with the ugliest truths. In any business or personal situation where you have made a mistake, this is the only path to preserving your reputation. The instinct, driven by fear and the outer scorecard, is to hide the problem, to hope it goes away, to manage the public perception. This is almost always a catastrophic error. Trust is not destroyed by the initial mistake. It is destroyed by the cover-up. So the blueprint is this. The moment you become aware of a problem or a mistake you've made, you address it. You go to the relevant parties, your client, your boss, your investors, and you lead with the bad news. You say, I have some bad news to share. We made an error. You then explain the problem clearly and concisely, without excuses. You accept full responsibility. And most importantly, you immediately follow up with your plan to fix it. This is terrifying in the moment. It feels like you are making yourself vulnerable. But what you are actually doing is seizing control of the narrative and demonstrating profound integrity. You are showing that you value the truth more than your own short-term comfort. This single act can turn a potentially reputation-destroying event into a reputation-enhancing one. Your clients and partners will not remember the mistake as much as they will remember your honesty and courage in dealing with it. By combining the 20-year test for proactive decision-making with a commitment to leading with the bad news for reactive problem-solving, you create a powerful system for building and protecting your most valuable asset, your reputation. The antithesis to this disciplined approach to reputation management is the pervasive growth-at-all-costs mindset. This is the path of the 99%, and it is littered with the wreckage of once great companies. The ultimate case study in this folly is Enron. In the late 1990s, Enron's outer scorecard was flawless. It was named America's most innovative company by Fortune magazine for 6 consecutive years. Its stock price was soaring. Its executives, Ken Lay and Jeff Skilling, were lauded as visionaries who were reinventing the energy industry. They were the darlings of Wall Street, the masters of the new economy. But this gleaming facade was built on a foundation of lies. The company's entire culture was pathologically obsessed with hitting quarterly earnings targets. This was the only metric that mattered. The pressure to make the numbers was so intense that it overrode every other consideration, including ethics and the law. This obsession with the outer scorecard, the stock price, the analyst ratings, the media praise, led to the creation of a shadow company. Enron began using deceptive and complex accounting tricks, like its infamous special-purpose entities, to hide massive debts and inflate its earnings. It was a Ponzi scheme dressed up in the language of corporate finance. Every quarter, the lies had to get bigger and more elaborate to keep the illusion going. The company's leaders lived in a hall of mirrors, where public perception had become more real than actual financial performance. They were so focused on winning the quarterly game that they lost sight of the fact that they were building a company with no real foundation. The inevitable collapse came in 2001. When the truth was revealed, the company imploded in a matter of weeks. The stock went from over $90 a share to less than $1. The company filed for what was then the largest bankruptcy in U.S. history. Thousands of employees lost their jobs and their life savings, which were heavily invested in Enron stock. The accounting firm Arthur Andersen, which had colluded in the fraud, was destroyed. The executives went to prison. Enron is the ultimate cautionary tale of what happens when a company's leadership team lacks an inner scorecard. They had no internal compass to tell them when they had crossed the line. Their only guide was the applause of the crowd and the ticker tape of the stock market. They prioritized the appearance of success over the reality of it. They traded their reputation, slowly at first and then all at once, for a few more quarters of glowing headlines. This is the danger of the growth at all costs mentality. It creates a system where people are incentivized to do the wrong thing. It subordinates long-term reputation to short-term results. And as the Enron saga proves, the bill for that trade always comes due, and the cost is always catastrophic. It is a direct and predictable consequence of valuing the opinion of others over your own integrity. Let's quantify the financial impact of reputation. We can call it the reputation premium, and its opposite, the reputation discount. A company with a sterling reputation, like Berkshire Hathaway, enjoys a tangible financial premium. First, as we touched on earlier, it has a lower cost of capital. When Berkshire wants to borrow money, it gets the best possible rates because lenders view it as the safest of bets. This can save the company hundreds of millions of dollars in interest payments over the life of a loan compared to a less trusted competitor. Second, it attracts and retains top talent at a lower cost. A study by the Corporate Responsibility magazine found that a significant percentage of workers would not take a job at a company with a bad reputation, even for a pay increase. Conversely, top performers are willing to take a pay cut to work for a company with a strong ethical reputation. This psychic income of working for a respected organization is a real financial benefit. If a company can hire better people for less money, it has a massive competitive advantage. But the most significant financial benefit comes in the form of acquisition opportunities. This is the secret sauce of Berkshire Hathaway. Countless owners of wonderful family-owned businesses have sold to Berkshire for significantly less money than they were offered by private equity firms. Why? Because they weren't just selling their company, they were choosing a permanent home for their life's work. They knew Buffett would not load the company with debt, fire all their employees and flip it in 5 years. They trusted him to be a steward of their legacy. This Berkshire Partnership Premium is a direct, quantifiable financial advantage derived entirely from Buffett's reputation. He gets to buy superior businesses at discounted prices because of the trust he has built over decades. Now consider the reputation discount that a company like Wells Fargo suffered after its series of scandals, including the creation of millions of fake customer accounts. The direct costs were staggering, billions of dollars in fines from regulators. But the indirect costs were even greater. The company's stock price dramatically underperformed its peers for years, wiping out tens of billions of dollars in shareholder value. They had to spend hundreds of millions on advertising campaigns just to try and rebuild trust. Their customer acquisition costs skyrocketed, as they had to offer richer incentives to attract new clients. And they faced a brain drain, as talented ethical employees left the company, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. Reputation, therefore, is not some fuzzy, intangible concept. It is a hard asset that can be valued. A good reputation lowers your expenses, increases your revenue, and gives you access to opportunities your competitors can only dream of. A bad reputation is a financial liability that will tax every single transaction you ever make. When Buffett says it takes 20 years to build and 5 minutes to ruin, he is not just giving moral advice, he is stating a cold, hard financial reality. The third pillar that underpins the inner scorecard is a concept that seems paradoxical in a world that celebrates bold, visionary leaders: intellectual humility. Specifically, it is the discipline of understanding and staying within what Buffett calls your circle of competence. An inner scorecard demands brutal honesty with yourself. It requires you to know what you know, but even more importantly, to know what you don't know. It means being comfortable admitting ignorance, a trait that is anathema to the executive who lives by the outer scorecard, who feels pressure to have an opinion on everything and project an aura of omnipotence. The most legendary example of Buffett's commitment to this principle was his decision to completely sit out the dot-com bubble of the late 1990s. It's hard to overstate the pressure he was under at that time. The market was in a state of collective hysteria. Any company with .com in its name was seeing its stock price multiply by 10, 20, or even 100 times, often with no revenue and no viable business plan. Technology was the new paradigm, and investors were convinced that the old rules of valuation no longer applied. Against this backdrop, Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway looked like dinosaurs. He openly admitted he didn't understand the business models of these new tech companies. He couldn't project their cash flows 10 or 20 years into the future, which was a core requirement of his investment process. He didn't understand their competitive advantages or how durable they would be, so he did nothing. He continued to invest in businesses he did understand, like insurance, furniture stores, and Coca-Cola. The Outer Scorecard was brutal. Barron's, a respected financial publication, ran a cover story in 1999 titled, "What's Wrong, Warren?" The article suggested he had lost his touch, that he was an old man who simply didn't get the new economy. The media ridiculed him. Berkshire stock significantly underperformed the high-flying NASDAQ index. Shareholders wrote him letters, begging him to get into tech stocks, to not miss out on the greatest wealth creation engine in history. The pressure from the herd was immense. A leader driven by an outer scorecard would have buckled. They would have made a few token investments in tech just to signal to the market that they were still relevant, to stop the negative press, to appease the shareholders. They would have prioritized the appearance of being with it over the discipline of their process. Buffett refused. He was measuring himself against his own inner scorecard, and that scorecard had one simple rule: never invest in a business you cannot understand. He was comfortable with the world thinking he was a fool, as long as he knew he was not acting like one. He famously said, "The most important thing to do if you find yourself in a hole is to stop digging." He saw the dot-com mania as a hole he didn't understand, so he simply refused to pick up a shovel. We all know how the story ended. In March of 2000, the bubble burst. The NASDAQ index collapsed by nearly 80%. Companies that had been worth billions went bankrupt overnight. Trillions of dollars of speculative wealth vanished. And Warren Buffett, the dinosaur, was revealed to be the wisest man in the room. While everyone else was nursing catastrophic losses, Berkshire Hathaway was sitting on a mountain of cash, ready to buy wonderful businesses at bargain prices from the wreckage. His refusal to step outside his circle of competence wasn't just a defensive move, it was a powerful offensive strategy. It preserved his capital during the mania, giving him the buying power to strike when there was blood in the streets. This story is the ultimate testament to the power of intellectual humility. True genius is not knowing everything, it is knowing the exact perimeter of your own ignorance. The psychological trap that Buffett so masterfully avoided is the Dunning-Kruger effect, coupled with the overconfidence bias. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias, in which people with low ability at a task overestimate their ability. In essence, they are too incompetent to recognize their own incompetence. This effect was rampant during the dot-com bubble. Amateur day traders who had gotten lucky on a few tech stocks suddenly believed they were investment geniuses. CEOs with no tech background were suddenly pivoting their industrial companies to become internet portals. They were operating so far outside their area of expertise that they couldn't even see the risks they were taking. The overconfidence bias is the related tendency for people to have excessive confidence in their own answers to questions. We systematically overestimate our own knowledge and ability to predict outcomes. When you combine the euphoria of a bull market with these two biases, you have a recipe for disaster. People become convinced they are infallible. Their past successes, even if driven by luck, are interpreted as proof of their genius, leading them to take on even greater risks. The inner scorecard, with its demand for self-honesty, is the perfect antidote to these biases. The practice of defining your circle of competence is an act of deliberate self-assessment. It forces you to confront the limits of your own knowledge. Buffett doesn't just think he knows his circle, he defines it with ruthless precision. He knows that his expertise is in understanding the long-term business economics of relatively stable industries. He knows he is not an expert in biotechnology, software development, or mineral exploration. This isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of profound intellectual strength. He is essentially saying, in this specific arena I have an advantage. In all these other arenas I am a patsy. Therefore, I will only play in the arena where I have an advantage. This self-awareness short-circuits the Dunning-Kruger effect. He is keenly aware of his own potential for incompetence in certain areas. It also neutralizes the overconfidence bias. By pre-committing to stay within his circle, he removes the temptation to believe he can outsmart the market in a field he doesn't understand, no matter how exciting it seems. The reason most people fail is because they let their ego drive their decisions. They wander into games they can't win because they are unwilling to admit they don't have an edge. Buffett's approach is to check his ego at the door and operate only where he has a demonstrable, sustainable, competitive advantage of knowledge. So how can you apply this principle and define your own circle of competence? The applied mental model for this is the 3 baskets exercise. It's a simple but powerful way to map your own knowledge and create clear boundaries for your decision-making, whether in investing, career choices, or entrepreneurship. Here is the blueprint. You will need a large piece of paper or a whiteboard. Draw 3 large circles, or baskets. Label the first basket, "I know this deeply." This is your true circle of competence. In this basket, you will list the subjects, industries, or skills where you have deep, first-hand, practical experience. This is not stuff you've just read about. This is stuff you have nibed on. Maybe you've worked in the retail logistics industry for 15 years. You understand its economics, its key players, its vulnerabilities, inside and out. That goes in the first basket. Maybe you are a master software engineer for a specific type of database technology. That's your circle. Be ruthlessly honest and strict. This basket should be the smallest and most well-defined. This is the arena where you are allowed to make significant financial or career bets. Now label the second basket, "I have passing knowledge." This is for topics you're interested in, that you've read about, that you can hold an intelligent conversation about, but where you lack deep, practical expertise. Maybe you've read a dozen books on artificial intelligence, but you've never actually built or deployed a machine learning model. A I goes in the second basket. Maybe you follow the electric vehicle market closely as a hobby, but you've never worked for an automaker. That goes in basket 2. This basket is for intellectual curiosity, not for investment. The rule for this basket is, you can learn here, you can watch, but you cannot commit significant capital or career resources. This is your watch list, not your action list. Finally, label the third basket, "I know nothing." This will be your largest basket. It contains everything else, the entire universe of subjects and industries you don't understand. Biotechnology, Russian politics, cryptocurrency mining, you name it. Be expansive. The goal here is to explicitly acknowledge your ignorance. When an opportunity arises that falls into this third basket, the decision is automatic. You pass. No analysis needed. It's an automatic no. By performing this exercise, you create a visual map of your intellectual territory. It gives you a clear, pre-decided framework for filtering opportunities. When a hot new investment trend emerges, your first question is not, "Is this a good opportunity?" but "Which of my 3 baskets does this fall into?" If it's not in basket 1, you simply move on. This mental model liberates you from the pressure of having an opinion on everything. It gives you permission to say the 3 most powerful words in business and finance, "I don't know." It replaces ego with a system, ensuring that you only play the games you are uniquely equipped to win. The antithesis of this disciplined approach is the diversification trap, a term coined by legendary investor Peter Lynch. This is the path of the 99% of corporate leaders who, flush with success in their core business, fall prey to the overconfidence bias and believe they can conquer any industry. They confuse success in one domain with universal genius. The result is a disastrous wave of acquisitions and expansions that destroy shareholder value and dilute the focus of the original, wonderful business. The quintessential example of diversification is the calamitous merger of AOL and Time Warner in 2000. At the time, AOL was the king of the Internet, the high-flying dot-com darling. Time Warner was the old media giant, owning everything from CNN and HBO to Warner Brothers Studios and Time Magazine. On paper, the Outer Scorecard logic was compelling. It was a bold, visionary move to combine the new media distribution of AOL with the old media content of Time Warner. The deal was hailed as a landmark, a, quote, merger for the new millennium. The leaders of both companies, Steve Case of AOL and Gerald Levin of Time Warner, were celebrated on the covers of magazines. They were visionaries, empire builders. But they had strayed catastrophically far from their respective circles of competence. The executives at AOL, who were experts in the internet subscription business, had absolutely no idea how to run a movie studio, a cable network, or a magazine publisher. The culture was a toxic clash of the fast-moving, casual internet world and the staid, hierarchical media conglomerate. The promised synergies never materialized because the two businesses had fundamentally different operating models, cost structures, and success metrics. The merger was an unmitigated disaster. Just 2 years later, the company had to report a goodwill write-down of nearly $100 billion, one of the largest corporate losses in history. The stock price collapsed, wiping out hundreds of billions in shareholder value. The merger is now universally taught in business schools as a textbook example of corporate hubris and value destruction. Steve Case and Gerald Levin were driven by the Outer Scorecard. They wanted to make a big splash, to create the biggest media company in the world, to secure their place in the history books. They were so blinded by the grand vision that they ignored the fundamental incompatibility of the businesses. They stepped out of their circles of competence and into a quagmire of their own making. This is the fate that awaits those who lack the intellectual humility to know their own limits. They mistake luck for skill, success in one area for mastery in all, and in their quest to build an empire, they end up presiding over a wasteland. The direct financial connection of staying within your circle of competence is perhaps the most powerful of all the pillars. It is the secret to avoiding what Charlie Munger calls unforced errors. In tennis, the amateur player loses the match not because their opponent hits brilliant, unreturnable shots, but because they themselves hit the ball into the net or out of bounds over and over again. They defeat themselves. It's the same in investing in business. The greatest destruction of capital doesn't come from missing out on the next big thing. It comes from making stupid, avoidable mistakes by venturing into areas you don't understand. The financial impact of simply avoiding these unforced errors is staggering. Consider the dot-com bust again. An investor who simply followed Buffett's advice and avoided investing in things they didn't understand would not only have preserved their capital, they would have outperformed the vast majority of professional and amateur investors who lost 50, 70, or even 100% of their money. The alpha, or excess return they generated, was not from brilliant stock picking, but from disciplined mistake avoidance. The quantification is simple. If the market goes down by 50%, you need a 100% return just to get back to even. The person who avoided the loss by staying in cash or stable value investments is now in an incredibly powerful position. Their capital is intact, and their relative buying power has doubled. This is the financial engine of Buffett's strategy. By avoiding the big losses that come from stepping outside his circle, he ensures his capital base is always preserved and ready to be deployed when opportunities within his circle become available at bargain prices. This principle also leads to a more concentrated and therefore more potent investment portfolio. Since your circle of competence is, by definition, limited, you will find far fewer investment opportunities that meet your strict criteria. This is a feature, not a bug. It forces you to be patient and to wait for the perfect pitch. When an opportunity does arise that is squarely in your wheelhouse, you can invest with immense confidence and conviction. Buffett's philosophy is to take a baseball bat to a handful of opportunities, rather than taking a teaspoon to thousands. This concentration of capital in your best, most well-understood ideas is how massive wealth is built. The 99% diversify their ignorance, spreading their money across dozens of stocks they barely understand, ensuring mediocre returns. The master of the inner scorecard concentrates their knowledge, making large, calculated bets on the few things they understand deeply. The financial result is a portfolio that is both safer, due to the avoidance of unforced errors, and has a much higher potential for extraordinary long-term returns. This brings us to our fourth pillar, a skill that is both a direct result of the inner scorecard and a critical tool for reinforcing it: the power of no. In a world that glorifies action, hustle, and being constantly busy, the most strategic and powerful move is often inaction. The ability to say no to opportunities that are good but not great, to deals that are popular but don't align with your core values, is a superpower. The person who lives by the outer scorecard feels compelled to say yes. They suffer from a chronic fear of missing out, FOMO. They want to be in every deal, at every meeting, part of every new trend. Saying no feels like a loss. The person guided by an inner scorecard understands that their time, their capital, and their focus are their most precious resources. Every time they say yes to something, they are implicitly saying no to everything else they could be doing with those resources. Therefore, they guard their yes with ferocious discipline. A fantastic story that illustrates this principle is Buffett's role in the 1998 bailout of the hedge fund Long-Term Capital Management, or LTCM. LTCM was not just any hedge fund, it was a dream team of financial superstars. It was founded by John Meriwether, the legendary bond trader from Salomon Brothers, and its partners included two Nobel Prize-winning economists, Myron Scholes and Robert Merton. Their IQ points were off the charts. They had developed incredibly complex computer models that they believed had unlocked the secrets of the market, allowing them to make massive bets with very little risk. For a few years, they were phenomenally successful. But in 1998, their models failed. A series of unforeseen global events, including a Russian debt default, caused the markets to behave in ways their formulas said were impossible. The fund, which was leveraged over 100 to 1, was suddenly facing catastrophic losses on the order of hundreds of billions of dollars. The entire global financial system was at risk. If LTCM collapsed, it would trigger a chain reaction of defaults that could bring down the world's biggest banks. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York orchestrated a desperate, weekend-long rescue mission. They gathered the heads of all the major Wall Street banks and urged them to put up $3.6 billion to bail out the fund and prevent a systemic meltdown. In the midst of this crisis, a call was made to Warren Buffett. He was seen as a potential white knight. A consortium led by Goldman Sachs, AIG, and Buffett offered to buy out the fund's entire portfolio for a mere $250 million and inject $4 billion of new capital. It was a classic Buffett move, stepping in with a low-ball offer when others are in a state of panic. The offer was presented to the partners at LTCM, but there was a catch. Buffett's offer was clean, simple, and non-negotiable. He was not going to get into a long, drawn-out bidding war or a complex negotiation with a room full of desperate bankers and arrogant academics. He gave them a very short deadline to accept. The partners at LTCM, in their hubris, thought they could get a better deal. They hesitated. They tried to negotiate. And in the end, Buffett's deadline passed. He simply said no and walked away from the deal. The Wall Street banks ended up cobbling together their own bailout package on slightly better terms for LTCM's partners. But Buffett's actions are the key lesson here. He had the opportunity to be the hero, to ride in and save the day, to be at the center of the biggest financial story of the decade. The outer scorecard was begging him to stay in the game. But the deal wasn't on his terms. It was becoming messy, complicated, and involved dealing with people he didn't fully trust or respect. His inner scorecard told him that the price of the deal, in terms of complexity and potential for future headaches, was too high, even if the financial upside was enormous. So he said no. He chose decisive inaction. He was perfectly happy to let someone else solve the problem, even if it meant missing out on a potentially profitable trade. This is a level of discipline most people can't comprehend. They are so afraid of missing out that they get drawn into bad situations, compromising their standards just to be part of the action. Buffett's power comes not just from his good decisions, but from the thousands of bad decisions he has avoided by having the courage and the clarity to simply say no. The underlying psychological principle that makes saying no so difficult is a potent combination of the fear of missing out, FOMO, and the commitment and consistency bias. FOMO is a relatively new term, but the anxiety it describes is ancient. It's a variant of social proof. When we see others getting rich from a new trend, or getting praise for a certain activity, we feel a powerful, visceral fear that we are being left behind. This fear clouds our judgment and pushes us to make impulsive decisions, to say yes to things we haven't properly analyzed, just to quell the anxiety of being on the sidelines. LTCM was the ultimate FOMO trap. The smartest people in the world were involved, and they were making incredible returns. To question their strategy seemed foolish. To not be involved felt like a mistake. The commitment and consistency bias describes our deep psychological need to be consistent with things we have already said or done. Once we take a small step in a certain direction, we feel a powerful internal pressure to continue in that direction to justify our initial decision. This is why salespeople try to get you to agree to a small request first. They know it makes you much more likely to agree to a larger one later. In the context of a deal like LTCM, once you've started the process, taken the phone call, flown to the meeting, started the due diligence, this bias kicks in. You feel invested. Backing out feels like a personal failure, an admission that you wasted your time. It feels inconsistent. So people continue down a path that is clearly becoming a bad idea, throwing good money after bad, simply to maintain a sense of consistency. Buffett's inner scorecard provides him with a powerful defense against both of these biases. His focus is not on what others are doing, but on whether an opportunity fits times criteria. This insulates him from FOMO. He doesn't care if he misses out on 100 mediocre opportunities. He is only concerned with capturing the few truly great ones that he understands. His discipline also allows him to short-circuit the commitment bias. He evaluates every deal on its merits at every stage. He is not emotionally invested in the outcome of the negotiation. If the terms are no longer favorable, or if he uncovers information that changes his assessment, he has no problem walking away. He is consistent not with his past actions, but with his core principles. This is a crucial distinction. The 99% feel pressure to be consistent with their recent decisions. The masters of the inner scorecard are only concerned with being consistent with their timeless values. This allows them to say no at any point in a process without feeling like a failure. It is, in fact, the ultimate success, the victory of discipline over impulse. To build this muscle of decisive inaction, the applied mental model is the creation of an anti-to-do list. This concept, often championed by Buffett's partner Charlie Munger, is a powerful inversion of traditional productivity advice. Instead of focusing on what you should do, you focus with equal or greater intensity on what you should not do. Here is the blueprint for creating and using your own anti-to-do list. First, identify your highest priority goal. This could be a business goal, like launching a new product line, or a personal goal, like improving your health. For this exercise to be effective, you must have clarity on what you are trying to achieve. Your yes must be clear before your no's can be powerful. Second, brainstorm all the activities, behaviors, and distractions that could prevent you from achieving that goal. This is your list of things to actively avoid. For a business goal, this list might include Do not attend any meetings that don't have a clear agenda and purpose. Do not get involved in projects outside our core business. Do not hire people who are talented but have questionable character. Do not check email for the first 90 minutes of the day. For a personal health goal, it might be, do not eat processed foods. Do not stay up past 10 p.m. on weeknights. Do not say yes to social engagements that interfere with my workout schedule. This list becomes your personal set of commandments, your rules of engagement for how you will allocate your resources. It's a pre-commitment device. You are making the decision to say no in advance, before you are in the heat of the moment. When your willpower is weak and FOMO is strong. The third and most important step is to review this anti-to-do list daily. It must become as ingrained in your thinking as your actual to-do list. When a new request or opportunity comes your way, you filter it through both lists. Does it help you with your to-do list? Does it violate your anti-to-do list? If it violates the anti-to-do list, the answer is an automatic no, regardless of how tempting it may seem. This model is powerful because it simplifies your decision-making. It dramatically reduces the number of choices you have to actively consider. By defining what you will ignore, you create vast, uninterrupted blocks of time and mental energy to focus on what truly matters. It is the operational blueprint for saying no systematically and strategically, transforming it from a reactive defense into a proactive strategy for success. The antithesis of this disciplined approach is the deal junkie. This is the executive, the entrepreneur, or the investor who is addicted to the thrill of the chase. Their identity is wrapped up in being a player and always having a new deal in the works. They live by the outer scorecard of activity. Being busy is their measure of success, not being effective. The deal junkie is driven by a deep-seated FOMO. They cannot bear the thought of a competitor making a move that they are not a part of. Their strategy is reactive, dictated by what others are doing, rather than by a coherent internal plan. As a result, they accumulate a portfolio of disparate, mediocre assets. They buy a company in one industry this year and a completely unrelated one the next. There is no synergy, no overarching logic, just a frantic collection of yeses. A classic example of this mindset can be seen in the disastrous reign of Carly Fiorina as CEO of Hewlett-Packard. She took over a company with a strong engineering culture and tried to transform it through a series of bold, headline-grabbing deals. Her signature move was the massive, contentious acquisition of Compaq in 2002. The deal was driven by a desire to be bigger, to have more scale, to make a dramatic move that would put her stamp on the company. The outer scorecard logic was that by combining two hardware giants, they could better compete with Dell. But the deal was a strategic nightmare. It doubled down on the low-margin commoditized PC business at a time when the industry was shifting toward software and services. The integration was a brutal, culture-destroying slog that distracted the company for years. The deal ultimately destroyed billions in shareholder value and led to Fiorina's ouster. She was a deal junkie. She was addicted to the action and the attention that came with making big moves. She said yes to a transformative deal that lacked a compelling internal logic because she was driven by the external pressure to do something. The deal junkie lacks the patience and the discipline to wait for the perfect pitch. They swing at everything. And while they may occasionally make contact, they strike out far more often than they hit a home run. They confuse activity with progress, and their constant motion creates a lot of heat but very little light. It is the path of the 99%, a frantic dash towards a mediocre destination, fueled by the fear of being left behind. The direct financial connection of the power of no is the principle of concentrated capital. This is the mathematical core of the Berkshire Hathaway fortune. By saying no to 99.9% of the investment opportunities that cross his desk, Buffett is able to reserve his capital for the 0.1% that he understands intimately and that are available at a compelling price. This allows him to make very large, concentrated bets. As he has often said, diversification is protection against ignorance. It makes very little sense for those who know what they're doing. Let's quantify this. Imagine an investor who diversifies across 50 different stocks. If one of those stocks doubles in value, a 100% gain, it only moves the needle on their total portfolio by 2%. It's almost meaningless. Now consider Buffett's approach. He might have the majority of his portfolio in just a handful of companies. When one of those positions generates a significant return, it has a massive impact on his overall net worth. The financial power of no is that it is the prerequisite for this kind of concentration. You cannot make large, confident bets if you are spreading your capital thinly across dozens of ideas you only partially understand. Saying no to the vast majority of opportunities is what creates the capital and the mental bandwidth to say yes in a big way when the time is right. This philosophy also has a profound impact on the operational efficiency of a business. A company that constantly says yes to new initiatives, new product lines, and new markets suffers from strategic drift. Its resources are spread thin. Its employees are pulled in a dozen different directions. The complexity of managing all these disparate activities creates a massive organizational drag, increasing overhead and slowing down decision-making. A company that has mastered the power of no, like the early Apple under Steve Jobs, is ruthlessly focused. When Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, the company was making dozens of different products, including printers and various models of the Macintosh computer. It was on the brink of bankruptcy. One of his first acts was to draw a simple 2x2 grid on a whiteboard. The columns were consumer and pro. The rows were desktop and portable. He said the company would focus on making only 4 products, one for each quadrant. He said no to everything else. This radical simplification saved the company. It allowed Apple to focus all of its engineering and design talent on making 4 great products instead of 30 mediocre ones. The financial result was one of the greatest corporate turnarounds in history. The power of no is not about being passive or timid. It is the ultimate strategic weapon. It allows for the concentration of force, of capital, of talent, of focus, on the very few opportunities that truly matter. It is the disciplined path to extraordinary financial results. This brings us to the 5th and final pillar, the concept that ties all the others together into a coherent philosophy for life and business: compounding character. We are all familiar with the idea of compounding interest. As Buffett has demonstrated, a small amount of capital, invested wisely, can grow into a massive fortune over a long period of time as the returns begin to generate their own returns. It is a process of exponential growth. Buffett's most profound insight is that character works in exactly the same way. Every decision you make based on your inner scorecard, every act of integrity, every time you choose the hard right over the easy wrong, is a small deposit in your character account. Over time, these deposits compound, and the trust, reputation, and self-respect you accumulate grow exponentially, creating a legacy of immense value. The perfect story to illustrate the compounding of character is Buffett's relationship with Rose Blumkin, the legendary founder of the Nebraska Furniture Mart. Mrs. B, as she was known, was a Russian immigrant who arrived in America without a dollar to her name and unable to speak English. In 1937, she started a furniture store in the basement of her husband's pawn shop in Omaha with a $500 loan. Her business philosophy was simple and uncompromising: sell cheap and tell the truth. She was the living embodiment of the inner scorecard. She was obsessed with giving her customers the best possible price, working relentlessly to cut out middlemen and pass the savings on. Her word was her bond. If she made a promise, she kept it, period. She built her business not through clever marketing, but through a fanatical devotion to her customers and an impeccable reputation for honesty. By 1983, the Nebraska Furniture Mart was the single largest home furnishing store in the United States, generating hundreds of millions of dollars in annual sales, all from one location in Omaha. Warren Buffett, a fellow Omahan, had watched Mrs. B's business for decades. He saw not just a profitable enterprise, but a business that was a direct reflection of its founder's unimpeachable character. He decided he wanted to buy the company. He went to see Mrs. B, who was then 89 years old. He didn't send a team of lawyers and accountants to do months of due diligence. He didn't pore over her financial statements looking for discrepancies. He asked her a few simple questions, and then he made her an offer. Mrs. B looked at him and said, "Mr. Buffett, how do I know you have the money?" Buffett replied that she could call her banker and check. She did. The banker confirmed that Mr. Buffett was good for the amount. Mrs. B then said, quote, "Okay, we have a deal." The entire transaction, for a company worth around $60 million, was done on a handshake, based on a 2-page contract that Buffett wrote himself. He didn't do a formal audit. He later explained, "I would rather have a handshake with Mrs. B than a 100-page contract with the biggest law firm in New York." Why? Because he wasn't just buying a business, he was buying character. He knew that Mrs. B's integrity was a far better guarantee of the company's value than any audited financial statement. The character had compounded for 46 years, creating a fortress of customer loyalty and goodwill. After the sale, Mrs. B, then nearly 90, continued to work at the store, putting in 70-hour weeks. A few years later, she got into a dispute with her grandsons, who were then managing the business. Frustrated, at the age of 95, she quit and started a rival furniture store across the street, which quickly became a massive success. Buffett, rather than being angry, was amused and impressed. He eventually bought her new company as well and merged it back into the original. The story of Mrs. B is the story of compounding character. Her relentless, daily deposits of honesty and value creation built a business empire from nothing. Her reputation became so powerful that it was, in itself, the company's most valuable asset, the thing Buffett was truly buying. It shows that integrity is not a constraint on business success, it is the ultimate engine of it. The underlying psychological principle that makes compounding character so powerful is our deep-seated human tendency to underestimate exponential growth. Our brains are wired to think in linear terms. If something grows by 10 units a day, we can easily project that in 10 days it will have grown by 100 units. But we are notoriously bad at intuitively grasping the power of compounding. If something grows by 10% a day, our linear brains have a very hard time comprehending the explosive, backloaded nature of that growth. This is why people fail to save for retirement. The small sums saved early on seem insignificant, and we can't mentally picture the massive snowball they will become in 40 years. The same is true for character. An individual act of integrity seems small. Choosing not to lie on an expense report, giving a customer a refund even when policy says you don't have to, admitting a mistake instead of covering it up. These are small, daily choices. They don't seem to have a huge immediate payoff. The outer scorecard world, which is obsessed with immediate visible results, devalues these small acts. It rewards the big, splashy gesture. But the person living by the inner scorecard understands that these small, consistent acts of character are like the early contributions to a retirement account. They are the seeds of an exponential curve. Each act of integrity builds a little bit of trust. That trust makes the next interaction a little bit easier. It builds a reputation which attracts better people to work with you. Working with better people leads to better outcomes, which further enhances your reputation. It's a virtuous cycle. The growth is slow and almost invisible at first, but over a period of decades, it accelerates dramatically. The person who has been compounding character for 30 years seems to have an unfair advantage. Opportunities just fall into their lap. People want to do business with them. They are given the benefit of the doubt. This isn't luck. It's the harvest from decades of planting seeds of integrity. The psychological mistake of the 99% is they suffer from a form of, quote, character hyperbolic discounting. This is our tendency to prefer smaller, sooner rewards over larger, later ones. They choose the small, immediate reward of cutting a corner to make a sale over the much larger, but delayed, reward of building a reputation for honesty. The Inner Scorecard is a tool to overcome this bias. It forces you to focus on the long-term exponential payoff of your character, and to see each small decision not as an isolated event, but as another step on that compounding curve. To make this abstract concept of compounding character tangible, the applied mental model is the character ledger. This is a private, personal accounting practice that tracks your integrity, just as you would track your finances. It's a way to consciously manage your most important asset. Here is the blueprint. Get a simple journal. This is your private ledger. At the end of each week, create 2 columns. Label the first column Deposits and the second column Withdrawals. In the Deposits column, you will record the actions you took that week that were in alignment with your inner scorecard, the person you want to be as described in your eulogy. These are your character deposits. It could be something small. I was honest with a client about a shipping delay, even though it might have cost me the sale. Or something significant. I stood up for a colleague who was being treated unfairly in a meeting. The act of writing these down reinforces the behavior and makes you consciously aware of your progress. In the Withdrawals column, you will record with brutal honesty the times you failed to live up to your own standards. These are your character withdrawals. Perhaps I exaggerated my role in a successful project to my boss, or I avoided a difficult conversation with an underperforming employee. This is not an exercise in self-flagellation. It is an exercise in self-awareness. The goal is to identify patterns. Are you consistently making withdrawals in certain types of situations? This highlights a weak spot, an area where you need to be more vigilant. The goal of this weekly review is simple: to make sure your deposits consistently exceed your withdrawals. Just like a financial account, you want your character capital to be growing over time. This practice does several things. First, it makes the abstract concept of character tangible and measurable. Second, it creates a feedback loop that encourages positive behavior and discourages negative behavior. Third, it forces a regular moment of reflection, a time to step back from the frantic pace of the week and ask yourself, am I becoming the person I want to be? Over months and years, your character ledger becomes a record of your journey. It is the ultimate testament to the power of small, consistent actions. It is the practical, hands-on tool for systematically compounding your own character, ensuring that your most valuable asset is always growing. The antithesis of compounding character is the figure of the talented tyrant. This is the brilliant but ethically compromised individual who is tolerated and often celebrated because they produce incredible short-term results. They are the star trader who makes the firm millions but treats their colleagues with contempt. They are the genius programmer who writes beautiful code but creates a toxic, hostile work environment. The path of the 99% of organizations is to make a deal with this devil. They look at the tyrant's stellar performance, their glowing outer scorecard, and they decide that the collateral damage to the company culture is a price worth paying. This is a catastrophic miscalculation. The story of Uber under its co-founder and former CEO, Travis Kalanick, is a stark example. Kalanick fostered a hyper-aggressive, win-at-all-costs culture. This culture undoubtedly fueled Uber's explosive growth and its disruption of the taxi industry worldwide. The company's outer scorecard was spectacular. It became the most valuable startup in the world, raising billions of dollars and expanding at a breathtaking pace. But Kalanick was a talented tyrant. His leadership style was abrasive, and the culture he created was rife with ethical problems. The company was plagued by scandals, from allegations of systemic sexual harassment to the use of a secret software tool called Grapple to deceive law enforcement officials in cities where Uber was operating illegally. For a long time, the board and the investors tolerated this behavior because the growth numbers were so good. They were making the classic mistake of valuing short-term results over long-term character. But character, or the lack thereof, also compounds. The toxic culture at Uber was not a series of isolated incidents. It was a systemic rot that eventually threatened the entire enterprise. The constant scandals created a massive public relations nightmare. It led to a #DeleteUber movement that saw hundreds of thousands of customers abandon the app. It made it incredibly difficult to recruit and retain top talent, especially women. It invited intense regulatory scrutiny from governments all over the world. The character withdrawals eventually became so large that they overwhelmed the business successes. The talented tyrant, once seen as the company's greatest asset, was now its greatest liability. Kalanick was ultimately forced to resign. The company had to spend years and billions of dollars trying to repair its culture and its brand. The story of the talented tyrant is a warning that character is not a separate, soft issue from business performance. It is not the business performance, just on a longer time horizon. Tolerating a character deficit in a key individual is like allowing a small amount of poison to be dripped into the company's well every day. The effects may not be immediately obvious, but over time, it will contaminate everything. It is the opposite of compounding. It is a slow, insidious, and ultimately fatal decay. The direct financial connection of compounding character is the most profound, and, in many ways, the most lucrative of all. It creates what we can call a legacy premium. This is the tangible financial value that is created when a business or an individual builds a reputation for integrity that transcends generations. It is the ultimate return on a lifetime of character deposits. Consider the financial structure of Berkshire Hathaway itself. It is not a typical corporation. It is a holding company with a highly decentralized structure. Buffett and Munger sit at the top in a tiny office in Omaha, and they delegate almost all operational responsibility to the CEOs of the subsidiary companies they own, like Geico, See's Candies, and BNSF Railway. This structure is only possible because of trust. Buffett only buys businesses run by people he trusts, and he trusts them to run their businesses without interference. This extreme decentralization dramatically reduces corporate overhead. Berkshire's headquarters has fewer than 30 employees, while managing a company with hundreds of thousands of employees and hundreds of billions in revenue. This is a massive, quantifiable financial advantage, a trust dividend that flows directly to the bottom line. Furthermore, this legacy of trust allows Berkshire to do deals that no one else can. When the financial crisis hit in 2008, the entire credit system froze. No one was lending money. Goldman Sachs, one of the most prestigious investment banks in the world, was on the brink of collapse. They didn't turn to the federal government. Their first call was to Warren Buffett. In a single weekend, Buffett agreed to invest $5 billion in Goldman Sachs. This wasn't just a financial transaction. It was a character transaction. Buffett's investment was a signal to the entire world that Goldman Sachs was sound. His reputation was the ultimate seal of approval. The deal he struck was incredibly favorable to Berkshire, including preferred stock paying a 10% dividend and warrants to buy Goldman stock at a low price. He was able to command these terms because he was the only person with both the capital and the character to make the deal happen. His compounded character gave him the power to act as a lender of last resort to the entire financial system, and he was compensated handsomely for it. This is the ultimate financial payoff of the Inner Scorecard. A lifetime of integrity deposits of compounding character doesn't just build a good reputation, it builds a financial fortress. It makes you the person people turn to in a crisis. It gives you access to opportunities on terms that no one else can get. It transforms your name into a balance sheet asset, your word into a binding contract, and your character into the ultimate source of compounding capital. You have just spent this time investing in yourself, acquiring a piece of mental software that has the power to fundamentally re-engineer your approach to every decision you will ever make. You now possess the framework of the Inner Scorecard, the master principle that has guided one of the world's greatest minds. You understand that true success is not measured by the fleeting applause of the crowd, but by the quiet, unshakable judgment you have of yourself. You have seen how this single idea builds an unbreakable reputation, fosters the intellectual humility to avoid catastrophic mistakes, grants you the superpower to say no to distraction, and ultimately allows your character to compound into a legacy of immense and lasting value. You have absorbed a powerful tool, but it is crucial to understand that what you have just mastered is a single foundational pillar in a much larger architecture. Buffett's system of success is not a collection of isolated tips. It is a network of interconnected mental models, each one reinforcing the others. The inner scorecard is the foundation, but a foundation is useless without the rest of the structure. The principles of value investing, the concept of economic moats, the psychology of market fluctuations, these are all separate, essential components that link together to form a complete system for rational decision-making. You have been given a detailed map of a single, vital territory, but it is only one piece of a much larger world map. The video that is now on your screen is not a random suggestion. Think of it as the next coordinate on that map. It is the missing link, the piece that connects the principle you just mastered to another, equally critical component of this mental arsenal. To navigate the complexities of modern business and finance, you need more than one tool in your toolkit. You need the complete set. What you have learned today about character provides the why. The video on your screen right now is designed to give you the how for another domain, to provide the next layer of this powerful operating system for success. The choice is yours. Are you someone who is content with a single piece of the puzzle, or are you a builder, someone who is committed to assembling the entire structure? The path to mediocrity is paved with incomplete knowledge. The path to mastery requires a relentless desire to connect the dots, to see the whole picture. The click you are about to make is not just a click to watch another video. It is a declaration. It is a decision to continue your ascent, to complete your mental toolkit, and to fully commit to the journey of becoming a truly rational and effective leader. Continue your journey. Complete the map.